Let's crack on. There's lots to talk about. I don't want to be death by PowerPoint. We don't like to hang around too long on these things as well. 20, 30 minutes. Hopefully you've got a cup of coffee if it's that time of day for you, and we'll rattle through these. The very first global Citrix partner to gain the networking for data center specialist accreditation. So that's us guys. We're cloudDNA. We're an interesting bunch, but this is all about Citrix Summit. And just for those who are not familiar, this is the Citrix partner and Citrix team member annual kickoff that happens somewhere in the US, Las Vegas last year, and over in California in Anaheim, Disney World, if you're familiar with the territory. The most surreal place you could have an IT summit, really. You're kind of going there with a lot of like-minded people, very, very cool people who know what they're talking about, super cool geeks all over the place. And then there's fully grown dudes wandering around with Mickey Mouse ears and references to Buzz Lightyear. And I kid you not, there were some people cutting the grass with scissors. Too much time on their hands. Anyway, so we were over there for the week. I was lucky enough to go to PTech. We learned lots of things there, which are under NDA. Many of the things that are spoken about at Summit are also under NDA. They'll come out on the full releases over in May time when the Citrix do their Synergy event, which is their customer-facing equivalent event. That's all in due course. There's some boundaries that I can't go across. We're an official Citrix partner, so I can't be too naughty, but I can just let you have a few hints here, and I will share some stuff that you won't have seen in the press or any other places at the moment because they are technically seeped out by official channels, although they're very well hidden. Citrix's usual PR effort to make sure everything is released covertly and by stealth is working nicely. So if you want to shout out, if you want to have questions, by all means ask those, but I'll get to those at the end of the session because I'm sat here on my own. Nobody wants to sit next to me with the lurgy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term the lurgy, just the general illness that's going on there. So first and foremost, I want to start out with this as NetScaler Management and Analytics System. And the reason why I start out with this, it's known as MAS, but we think it's massive. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your environment if you're going to look at deploying MAS. And I'll give you a few indications as to why. And just to set the scene, it's a standalone device which allows us to view, to automate, and to manage network services across the whole of our estate. So if you're familiar with the old way of doing things from the Citrix technology stack, we used to have Command Center. In fairness, all of these products are still commercially available and still supported. But we used to have Command Center for the management and report and monitoring, a little bit of SSL cert key management, those sorts of things, potentially an SNMP trap if you're that way inclined for the technical aspect. So Command Center gave you a single point of aggregation where you could see what all of your appliances were up to, and to a certain extent you could manage functionality on those appliances as well. So that was good. Insight Center, this has been hugely popular. Included in all of the NetScaler appliances, you needed to go up into the Platinum Edition to get the bells and whistles. But this gives you service visibility at a very, very granular scale. I can dig down into individual servers. I can look at individual users and challenges that they're facing. And it gives me some real clean metrics to be able to understand why my service levels are failing and what I can do to go and remediate those. This has been hugely popular. I guess this is probably now a couple of years old, maybe 2.5 years old. But we've seen it grow and we've seen its capabilities grow over the time. And it's been a really useful device for an awful lot of organizations. There's been hiccups along the way, of course, as these things always do. But if you haven't seen that already and you're thinking about going for Insight Center, don't do that. Because included in MAS is Insight Center, Command Center, and for those of you who are going for a cloud orchestration mechanism at the moment, then Control Center sits in there as well. This is really the SDN control plane. So wanting to spin up NetScaler resources to be able to provision those appliances with a config and to be able to manage those appliances, this all used to be done by 3 different completely separate isolated workloads, 3 different workloads, 3 different server instances, 3 different management consoles. So you can see the logic behind bringing MAS all together and bringing all of those functionalities into a single coherent screen, a single GUI to be able to provide all that functionality. So in the classic data center management idea, NetScaler MAS really strains across the whole platform of NetScaler appliances. This could be physical ADCs. In fairness, this could be virtual ADCs as well. I should update that slide. For those of you using standalone gateway appliances, NetScaler MAS can integrate with those. For this hugely popular SD-WAN movement that we're seeing at the moment, then NetScaler MAS sits across that. So if it's got a NetScaler badge on it from a delivery appliance perspective, as a gateway, as an ADC, or as a WAN optimization or SD-WAN device, then NetScaler MAS can help orchestrate those workloads and can help you manage those workloads and to keep an eye on user service levels and the performance in there as well. But times are a-changing, my friends. And what we're seeing now is that the data center is becoming borderless. We're finding now that the adoption of hybrid clouds and multi-clouds means that these workloads are now disappearing off not only from inside our on-prem data centers, but perhaps you're spinning those up in AWS or in Azure or in a third-party hosted cloud environment, maybe a colo location, or potentially any mixture of those things. The hybrid cloud gives us this hugely flexible way of delivering services to our users, maybe putting points of presence in localities and geolocations. But similarly, as we're starting to do this in many organizations, even in the enterprise, not just those big web monsters nowadays, we're starting to look at SDN control and how that fits in with the mix as well. Now, bringing all of that functionality into one appliance, you would immediately think to yourself, haha, I have seen the future and I can't afford it. And you'd be right for thinking that, because historically, this is an expensive way around of doing things. And realistically, for the huge amount of organizations, we're going to simply look at that and say, nah, not for me, thank you. The challenge, however, is that these workloads are moving, and we're starting to see more people migrating services to the cloud. Now, at Citrix Summit, there's a huge amount of information about the way that the Microsoft integration is going and the way that Citrix Cloud is starting to expand its footprint. And there are potentially services that Citrix will offer as cloud-based services. And some of those will rely on localized NetScaler appliances. So having some kind of mechanism to be able to manage all of that is a really key element for the success of our future environments. This statement, hands in the air, anybody know where this comes from? Yeah, I grew up in the 80s, so this is a fantastic. If you Google that, you'll find out it's a great tune. It's a little song by a little band back in the 80s. Anyway, so from a classic data center perspective, what we're looking to do with NetScaler management and analytics system is to be able to give us fleet management, to be able to look after all of those various different NetScaler instances. Maybe you've got some hardware at the front door and you've got virtual appliances sat at the back. Maybe you are in the DevOps frame of mind and you've got some virtual appliances, the CPXs that are running in container environments. NetScaler MAS allows you to orchestrate all of those from one single point of console. Now, application-centric management comes into the mix now, where we're starting to use the visibility and the analytics capabilities here to be able to make some decisions on the fly, to be able to orchestrate the spinning up of new devices and doing those in the local location, obviously, as it's suggested here. But obviously, as we're getting over to the borderless data center, that can then stretch out to say, okay, I'm running out of grunt in my data center. I need some more power. I need some more resources. Perhaps we spin those up in Azure. Perhaps we spin those up in our hybrid cloud environment. We start to get to this point where we're managing infrastructure as a code as we move to the next generation, as we move to this borderless data center enterprise. Application-centric management still sits there very neatly. The orchestration of all those workloads, though, and making sure the traffic gets to the right places when these NetScaler instances and the services that they support are located in disparate locations. Bringing that visibility and analytics back into the mix as well. This really starts to get very powerful. I'd really encourage you to look at MAS, and I know you might have looked at this and said, well, it's a NetScaler upgrade and we should be looking at ADCs, but this is really a key differentiator for Citrix at the moment. Have a look at this, start to play with it, because at PTech, we had a look at this is the Partner Technical Expert Council that I was fortunate enough to go to a couple of days before Summit. I've seen the roadmap for this, and it's huge. There's more development in MAS than practically any other product in the Citrix suite, and there's good reason for that. And as you start to see how these new features and functionalities will filter into the marketplace, you'll start to see why that's a good idea to get involved now. Get used to it, get using it, get the value out of it. Good news, if you've got your NetScaler ADCs, your gateways, or your SD-WAN appliances, it's included in the cost. There are some functionalities that you need to unlock by license key, but to get you started, you can do many of the things we're talking about now without any additional cost. You just need to find somewhere to host it. So as we move through into here and we're starting to look at this idea about management of appliances, I love this this term that they're using of pets to cattle. So the idea of having, well, personally, this would be pets to chickens. So I've got a couple of chickens, 7 chickens, and then now if I had 1,000 chickens, I would no longer be calling them by their names and whistling them to come and get their corn. I'd have to start thinking about a different way of managing them, probably using my dog. Well, this is the NetScaler MAS that's helping us do that. Now, it helps us to migrate from that partial concept of SDN to a full SDN environment, and that might come over time. It's a real simple thing that there are very few organizations that want to go from that big bang approach. I want to chuck everything in one go and hope it works. It doesn't work like that in the real world. It's too risky. So as we start to migrate to these new mechanisms of working, like software-defined networks, then this orchestration tool, this management tool, allows us to keep control of all of that, allows us to ensure that we're application centric from our service levels and from our load balancing mechanisms. And again, just to reiterate, moving from the on-premise to the hybrid cloud environment. That visibility then allows you from that single console to keep an eye on all of those devices, to orchestrate those devices, to keep an eye on the service levels, and to manage those multi-cloud instances all from that one place. I think, I kind of banging on about this a little bit, but hopefully you see the value in what I'm talking about there. But it does come back down to one very simple thing, which is you can't manage what you can't measure. And this is very simple. How do you know if the user experience is poor? What is the user perception of the experience? Is that user perception valid and relevant? Is the reason why that user's session is poor down to something that you have control over, or is it something that is completely out of your control? For example, they're coming in over a 3G network and it's a very poor network condition and they're using a super old school BlackBerry device to access the services. Without this kind of information in the way that the industry is working towards at the moment, you're going to have yourself up against the wall trying to deliver service levels when you don't know what those service levels actually are at the endpoint. And this is why we find that MAS has really got some serious value in here. If we take it from a network perspective, either volumetric or utilization data insights, if you're of a technical mindset, these acronyms and the like will mean something to you below there. But being able to look from a very granular perspective at the actual configuration and the network infrastructure side of things, being able to see what's happening there is of great value. If you want to move that on to the next step, then we're looking at insight analytics. So those of us that are using Citrix XenApp or XenDesktop may want to have greater levels of understanding of how a user session is performing in the HDX protocol or the ICA protocol, if you're old school, I mean. You might want to understand how your web service is performing for a particular set of users, maybe in a particular geography or a particular territory or on a subset of devices or using particular browsers. You might want to understand more about the security metrics and the SSL encryption overheads and the SSL considerations for your service as well. So this insight analytics that sits within the NetScaler MAS platform gives you that kind of information. Application layer, data capacity, planning, performance, and threat management, all in that same console. So you start to see this is really quite powerful. Just excuse me a moment, I'm going to have a little sip. Oh, wow, that's better. Okay, so as we move on, there's one last final piece in here as well. This is about having advanced analytics, being able to actually automate the troubleshooting and threat detection on the appliances as well. So as we have these services dotted about all over the place, it's no longer rational and sensible to assume that we can log into all these different devices and to be able to pull out the various different metrics that we need from those different devices. It's just not enough hours in the day. Logging into all those consoles is no longer an option. Having all of that concentrated in one location makes it super easy to look after. But if that device, if that NetScaler MAS device is clever enough to be able to recognize where there are challenges, taking advanced metadata and other high value user impacting scenarios, being able to take all of that information, condense it all into one place, and to a certain extent to be able to automate the troubleshooting mechanism in there and the remediation mechanism in there, you start again to see some of the value in MAS. Get involved with this. It's really, really powerful. And if you add this, if you've been on one of our previous webinars, you'll be familiar with the stylebooks functionality. Stacks more stylebooks coming off online at the moment. So when you buy your NetScaler appliance, you plumb it into your MAS appliance, and then you'll be able to use style books to effectively give you a step-by-step guide of how to deliver Exchange services or SharePoint, or how to configure it for your storefront servers. Effectively, these style books are scripted mechanisms where you stick in the IP addresses and the URLs, and it does the rest. You've still got control. You can tweak it around if you want to, but there's no point in reinventing the wheel every time we want to do these things. We know what needs to be done, so let's script it. Let's make it super easy to understand from a graphic user interface perspective. And at the back end of that, let's have a configuration audit mechanism as well, which also is sat there in the MAS platform, so that we can look at when a user perhaps or one of the administrators wants to bring in a new service, we can check that that service has been configured to our standards and it's conforming in the way that we want it to. Hugely powerful. Now, there's something that's new in here, and these aspects that we've been talking about so far, there's plenty of new bits and pieces in there already, but this is quite a new piece here. So the application health score, which is tied to the NetScaler metadata. So have we got a poor user experience caused by latency or availability of servers or some kind of anomalies or errors? Having all this information being pumped into the MAS appliance allows us to effectively come up with a score mechanism to be able to understand from that server latency and availability the actual ADC health, CPU and memory, anomalies such as surge queues or uneven load balancing, security attacks, and using the threat index, which has come through in 11.1, which again you can see in one of our previous webinars, either on YouTube or on our cloudDNAgroup.com site, and things like DNS, DDoS attacks, or HTTP errors. Giving these applications a score level can give you a very simple image to look at when you log into the machine to see which applications are doing great and which are not doing so well. What we want is lots of green lights. Higher scores mean healthier apps. Scores are calibrated for each NetScaler vServer and displayed as a function of time, so it's real time or over a period of time. Data from the NetScaler includes those NetScaler counters and transactions logs, and also it's exported to MAS through the log stream technology, if you're familiar with that. So in this instance, again, what we're then going to get is a very simple graphical representation of what's going on that environment, and where you've got those red or yellow kind of services, you may want to go and jump into those straight away and just have a little look before the users start complaining about service levels. It's really cool. I like this. There is a couple of screenshots floating about, but we're under NDA and I can't show those with you. However, if you go on on twitter.com, and I didn't need to say .com there, did it? If you go on Twitter and have a look at NetScaler Taylor, that's me, that's at NetScaler TAYLOR. If you scroll back to Tuesday of last week, you might find I accidentally hit the Periscope button when I was trying to take a picture. So you might just get a little bit of a walk round of that console on there. Just make a note of that and have a look at that later. It gives you a little bit of a feel for it. There's an issue with an application. We can look at it, we can drill down on it, we can drill down as to why that application is not performing. It gives us really, really granular information so we can get to the bottom of the problem straight away. Okay, so new little feature in here, SSL Insight. SSL's everywhere. There's huge amounts of SSL traffic coming, and there's a slide in a moment that's going to explain a little bit why that's happening. But there's some new metrics available to us to be able to understand which of these different ciphers and which of these different SSL mechanisms we're actually utilizing on the platform. And this is really about capacity planning. So again, quite granular use case, but very, very relevant in today's environment. We need to know and we need to understand what SSL traffic we're delivering, and more importantly, we need to understand the SSL CPU utilization. So from a management perspective, from a planning perspective, what we tend to find is application delivery controller appliances tend to run out of computational resource from an SSL perspective before they run out of it from an HTTP perspective, especially now. And the reason for that is the increase in SSL encryption that we have as an industry. If you take it back to 1998, e-commerce, that's when we started to see HTTPS and the little padlock popped up in the browser. As we've moved through more into privacy, into mobility, into the Snowden effect, and now as we move into 2017 and into 2018, there's a couple of key drivers that are really hammering that SSL encryption overhead requirement. One of those is those friendly people at Google. They're pretty much determining now that if you don't have SSL encryption on your website, they're going to hammer your SEO rankings on their search engine. So in other words, if you're SSL encrypted, you'll come up higher in the search response than those organizations that are not SSL encrypted. So by default, more of us want SSL encryption, right? Makes sense. But there's a computational overhead that needs to be taken into consideration for that from our application delivery controller. And there's another thing as well. We all know about the old school mechanisms that the internet works on. And there's been lots of drivers in the background to try and improve the performance of the internet in general, about how we try and make the internet work better without going down the lines of doing a wide area network kind of WAN optimization device, if you're familiar. So the Speedy protocol was a bit of a work in progress from Google, which was trying to find ways of mitigating some of the effects of TCP's inefficiencies. And that's really manifested itself over time into HTTP 2.0. So as we move into this HTTP 2.0, The primary browsers that we use in the industry or across the commercial side of things as well, the Chromes, the Firefoxes, pretty much anything, the Safaris, Internet Explorer, Edge, they're all determining that to use HTTP2, we must have SSL encryption in there as well. So take all of these considerations into thought. And you can see from there that the amount of SSL encryption that we're going to need to perform is increasing quite significantly. So why is this important? Well, you're going to need more appliances, or you're going to need to come up with a new way of encrypting traffic that squeezes more bang for your buck out of your NetScaler appliances. And our NetScaler has always been pretty good at this. And the reason why folks choose the hardware over the software virtual appliances, even though there's feature parity in there and you get the same kind of functionality out of it, is that the hardware has dedicated chipsets to do the SSL encryption. But there's only so far you can push that. And now, if there's a new way of thinking about things, then there's a new way of delivering increased SSL performance and scale, but without swapping the appliance. Now, if you're technically minded, have a think about that, and you'll probably think it out yourself. I can't say anything, it's NDA, but watch out for this increase in SSL performance, and some of these metrics are very, very significant. As we look to push out more SSL encryption, this is going to be relevant for us. I'm just going to take another little wee sip of something. Lovely, that lukewarm coffee, can't beat it. Okay, so there's some new hardware that's going in the background here as well. Some new low-end appliances. Those who are familiar with the 5000s, the 5500 series, and the 8000 series, you're going to have some new kids on the block around there. Greater scale, more scale steps. So in other words, not just 2 steps on the entry-level device, but 3 or potentially more on the 8000 series. Some new port options and a new feature for the entry-level appliance, which is really going to improve the resilience. Now, this is under NDA. I can't say anything more about it, but I took this picture while I was stood next to the what was effectively known as the best rack in LA, which is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I'm sure you see where I'm coming from. If you know your NetScalers, then you'll understand why this is relevant. So keep an eye out for the official communications about these bits. They'll be floating around about the end of February, but certainly throughout Q1. So next piece is let's take some elephant in the room time. I've got a blog post coming out on this in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out again, cloudDNAgroup.com/blog, and you'll see my NetScaler Taylor blog in here. But license management we're going to get into in here. There's 3 significant elephant in the room type of conversations that we have with organizations when we're looking at specifying NetScaler appliances. First and foremost is, if we buy hardware, a lovely shiny piece of tin, and when it's brand new, we love it to bits. It comes with a license key on it, and that's a good thing. So the hardware and the license key are sat together, and they live in perfect harmony throughout the duration of their lifetime. But when I write off my hardware because it's got old and worn out and we don't love it anymore, the license key gets written off with it as well. So I've paid for the license key, and if I paid for a virtual appliance license key, I could keep that forever and a day. But if I pay for a hardware appliance and it comes with a license key, then I can't keep that. That doesn't seem particularly fair. Okay, how about this one? How big does your license need to be? Now, with many instances, we have to specify NetScaler appliances based on a perception of how much traffic we think they are going to deliver. Now, in some instances, you've got a very finite number of users, you've got a very finite number of services. It's a pretty easy conversation to have. But often, we're going to find that users have to, or organizations have to specify an appliance that's a bit bigger, or maybe quite a bit bigger than they actually need, because they don't want to have the appliance causing a bottleneck at the times of peak usage, or that the service is going to grow in popularity. And it's not possible then to be able to keep up with the demands of the users. We either need to have to uplift the license key, tri-scale messaging, usual stuff, or we need to apply another appliance in there and do a cluster mechanism or something similar. Now, these things are all good, they all work. But clustering, you've still got to find the operational overhead of a host and potentially a hypervisor of some way, shape, or form, and the traffic management of that. It just becomes a little bit more complex. Okay, what about this other bit? What about migrating from the on-prem to the cloud services? Well, again, if this is a genuine use case, in fact, I'll tell you this genuine use case. Customer bought 18 months ago, bought a big old stack of NetScaler appliances, 14,000 series, very happy with those. But now they're looking to migrate everything up into the cloud, and they can't take those license keys with them. The hardware is great. It's doing all the things it needs to do, but the license key is tied to the hardware, and the hardware can't go into Azure, and it can't go into their third-party provider hardware, hybrid cloud provider as well. So they've got to start. They've got to start looking at purchasing new license keys, and got those super shiny 14,000 sat there doing nothing. So wouldn't it be really good if you had a mechanism where you had a license pool, and you could say take a chunk of licensing capability, and in certain instances physical appliances or virtual appliances, both on-premise and in cloud type of solutions, and you could split up that license capability across those different instances, and there could be quite a significant number of them. The number of instances would become less relevant. It's more about the combined throughput of all of those instances. This is really cool, and you could then, in theory, have a new appliance that you purchase without a license key on it, and then you apply the license key from the pooled license stack. So if you need hardware performance, you buy a bare metal piece of tin and you apply the license key you require within the boundaries of the tin's capability. If you want flexibility to be able to spin licenses up and spin appliances up where you need them, wherever they may be, then this gives you the flexibility to do that as well. Now, there hasn't technically been a full-blown bells and whistles kind of release about this anywhere, and so you could argue this might be a little bit NDA, but I don't think it is, because I had a look on YouTube and found a video that Citrix have published about this. So this is pooled licensing capability on NetScaler. It's new, it's not been released in terms of pricing yet, but it's going to be very relevant for some of the organizations that we're talking to as well. Okay, so if we look at the NetScaler family, it's a hugely diverse set of products in here now, and there's masses of this stuff, as we know. Going through from the MPX physical appliances, the SDX physical appliances with a hybrid virtual architecture, virtual appliances in the VPX, and now the CPX for those organizations looking to go for the DevOps kind of mentality, plus the application firewall, the telco series, and the gateways. There's a huge set of products floating about in that NetScaler stack these days. But I want to just focus on this little SD-WAN piece at the end here as well, because it has a NetScaler badge now. And I did a little blog post about all this a week ago while I was waiting for the aeroplane. And I really think that this is the year that the NetScaler SD-WAN piece is going to really take off. There's a huge amount of feature additions coming in 9.2. That is scheduled for the end of February. Now, I can't say, again, because we're an official partner in the lines of the NDA, I can't go into too much details about it. But we've been working with organizations across all verticals, across all sizes, who have come to the conclusion that application delivery control, and more importantly, service delivery control, has taken on a different facet to just being a load balancer. Load balance is easy. There's loads of places you can do that. But when you start to look at service delivery, we need more functionality. And that's why NetScaler has circa 3,500 features in a Platinum Edition appliance to help you deliver all of those little bits and pieces that make service delivery what it is for your organization. If we take that to the next mix, having the SD-WAN capability in there as well, well, to my knowledge, Citrix are the only vendor that have market-leading ADC and SD-WAN solutions, which are all managed from that one MAS control, as we said about previously. But with this SD-WAN piece, I'm just going to take a couple of moments to focus on this. This, without a doubt, was the biggest buzz from the NetScaler stack across the whole of the seminar session, to the point where there's a new mechanism to be able to roll these things out. So just to position this, we have NetScaler SD-WAN webinars up on YouTube and up on the cloudDNAgroup.com website. And go and have a look at those if you want to familiarize yourself with them. But the basic principle is we want to give the best possible user experience, the highest possible level of resiliency, and the lowest possible cost for all the users out in our branch locations. It was quite amusing to be sat in the audience and see this demonstration of zero-touch provisioning. When your man there is sat on the stage and saying, I'd like to show you how zero-touch provisioning works, but first I need a NetScaler appliance. It's a good way to wake people up on a Tuesday morning to fly one across the auditorium with a drone and drop it off in his hands. He opened the box, he pulls out the device, and we know this man. I'll not name him to save his embarrassment. but pulls out the box and literally plug the thing in, and it calls home. And this NetScaler SD-WAN, which could be in a branch location, some far away land, calls home, picks up its configuration, points itself back to the data center, and gives you an optimized, secure, reliable link over the wide area network with a hybrid WAN technology, without any real serious effort from the branch location. And why is this important? Well, historically, we've always had to have this issue where a user in a branch location isn't technical, so you have to send a technical representative, a technical consultant of some way, shape, or form to go to the branch to plug the kit in and to make sure that it's all functioning properly. And that takes time and cost and effort. Now, if those branches are all over the world, there's a big time and cost and effort. Whereas in this mechanism, it's literally power cable in, LAN side cable in, WAN side cables in, the cables, as it's a hybrid WAN solution, and the thing will call home, pick up its config, and get cracking straight away. It makes it super easy to roll these out to either your local offices, even if they're only a mile down the road or 10 miles down the road. It still makes life a lot easier in that respect, but when you start to push that further afield across continents and across the globe, that's a really cool set of features to be able to do that. So this is this zero-touch functionality. Now, again, that's all over Facebook and Twitter, so I can talk about that. But 9.2, which is coming at the end of February, has a huge amount of improvements. Some really, really awesome capabilities coming. New security capabilities which are extremely relevant, extremely valid, and things that our customers have asked us for. New networking capabilities that are going to make life easier, give you better call quality on your voice over IP, give you better quality of service capabilities and better quality of service for your applications and your services that you are delivering out to your users, and ultimately as well to increase visibility. Now, again, if you think about some of these things and you know the technologies, you could probably work it out. If you're not familiar, keep an eye out for your mailbox. We'll send you another little link about our SD-WAN webinar coming up probably the first week of May, or the first Friday in March, rather, not May, sorry. First Friday in March, and we'll probably just run a webinar then to run through these new features and functionalities. These are really relevant from the customers that we've been speaking to across the SD-WAN requirements that we've been working on really almost for 2 years now. So that gives you an indication of what's new in NetScaler ADC, SD-WAN, and MAS. It all comes down to user experience, but as usual with NetScaler, the scale, the efficiency, the security, and the availability all come into the mix as well. It was a great seminar. There's lots more to talk about. Keep an eye out on the cloudDNAgroup.com blog pages where we'll be talking about some of these features in more detail when the NDAs are lifted. And if you can't wait till then, just keep an eye out every Friday morning. There's a new edition went out this morning. ilovenetscaler.com gives you a rundown from not only the official sources, but also across the world. Anybody that's blogging, anybody that's talking about NetScaler, and anybody that's got something interesting to say, we'll pop it up on there and let you share that. Register for that, or at least subscribe for it. There's nothing to pay, but it'll just keep you up to date with what's going on in this hugely quickly developing area of the marketplace. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to end the official piece there. I'm just going to just double check and see there's no questions in the background there. I doubt it, because I know you're shy. I know you're busy and shy. But as usual, if you've got any questions, if you want to reach out to us, cloudDNAgroup.com. If you send a chat message thing through that through the website, or go through @cloudDNA on Twitter, we'll pick that up and I'll come back to you personally if you've got any bits and pieces. Let me just double check on the bit there. No, of course not. There you go. Nice and easy. Lovely. It's Friday morning. Nobody else asking questions. I thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. I will see you again soon. Keep an eye on your mailbox for forthcoming webinars, and have a look on YouTube for some of those old webinars that we've got. Just search cloudDNA TV and you'll find a list of those. Hope you have a great weekend, and whatever you're doing, be safe, be warm, and we'll see you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.